Hello, and thank you for choosing to watch this video, number 19 in the What If Fantasy Model Kit box art series. This series looks at imaginary model kits of some cool sci-fi TV and film kits that I wish had been made when I was growing up. This year marks the 60th anniversary of Thunderbirds being first shown in 1965. Let's just jump right in. The USS Sentinel. This is an advanced, sort of high-speed US Navy strike vessel. It features in the Thunderbirds episode, Terror in New York City. It detects an unidentified aircraft and assumes it is a potential threat and promptly fires some missiles to shoot it down. Unfortunately, the unidentified aircraft is Thunderbird 2, returning from a rescue mission. It gets hit, it gets damaged really badly, and is out of commission. Later in the episode, International Rescue called upon to help two TV news reporters who are trapped underground in New York City. And International Rescue call upon the Sentinel to help get Thunderbird 4 there in time. And it's sort of hoisted aboard the Sentinel where it travels at a pretty good clip. You get a sense of the size of it because you do see Thunderbird 4 when they sort of haul it aboard. When you see the ship travelling along, you can kind of see it sitting on the deck area or whatever that area is called on a ship that's below the deck but not the hull. Anyway, you can see it on there and it looks like it's about 600 feet long. So Airfix's scale for their battleships or ships in general was 600, so this would come in at 12 inches long. The Sentinel's strange. I mean, it's really memorable because, you know, it shoots down Thunderbird 2. You only ever see it from one angle. You only ever see it in profile racing across the ocean. There are several illustrations in some of the technical manuals of what the rest of it looks like, so I've tried to interpret it as best I can, but there is a level of artistic license. But I thought a sort of a down angle where you could actually kind of see it a bit dramatically and have it launching the missiles would be a good way to kind of show it off. Also in that episode, it actually starts out with International Rescue wrapping up an operation and there's a news crew that are trying to film it. And of course, Scott tells them that no pictures are allowed and all the rest of it. And it's NTBS, the National Television Broadcasting System. And they have this van and has a camera on top where his cameraman Joe can sort of shoot whatever. And Ned Cook drives the van and reports in. And this is a great little van. It appears in many, many episodes in different guises. And I guess it's another one of those great examples of hardware in Thunderbirds that just sort of fleshes out the world. Chances are it may have been done for economic reasons that this was a model they had, so they could reuse it and redress it. It's the Ford Transit van of, the Thunderbirds world, if you like. You see it in Day of Disaster, where the Martian space probe being transported is being televised. You see Lady Penelope and Brains watching it on TV, and there's a nice shot of the transporter going past. You see this van parked, and the guy filming it, panning along, following the rocket, which is just, fantastic. So that is sort of the inspiration for this artwork, where I thought, well, how do we kind of make it lively? So I thought, well, let's do it as if you're getting ready to shoot that sort of angle we see of when Brains is watching TV. Doesn't really match up, but it is a wide shot. And I just thought it was fun to kind of see it and see the bridge in the distance with the rocket moments before the disaster strikes. So this was a fun one to paint. Actually, the perspective was kind of difficult. There's a few cheats in it, but I think it does the trick. Like I said, you see this thing in multiple episodes in different configurations. Sort of the next most memorable is in Edge of Impact, where the Hood sort of disguises himself first with the North Pole Cleaning Company, and then actually he uses it again sort of as a sort of telecommunications repair van, but it's the same sort of blue version, just with the different markings on it. There's a scene in Edge of Impact where the Hood calls the airport control tower and tells them there's going to be a problem with the Red Arrow project. So I painted it sort of in a imagined version of that sort of area from maybe a slightly different angle. So you can see some of the airport back there, the airport control tower, and the Phonovision booths. I put 2 in here because they're kind of neat. I love that there's sort of video phone booths and stuff. So again, they just sort of wanted to create a bit of a scene that looks like, oh yeah, I remember that from the show, even though this isn't a direct interpretation of a scene. This thing also shows up in the Mighty Atom. It's one of the vehicles sort of you see when they're sort of evacuating the base. You see it in Operation Crash Dive. You also see it in The Imposters. I think it's parked. You also see it in Alias Mr. Hackenbacker. There's 2. There's one that the kind of the heavies who are sort of in hiding out in the desert for the rendezvous, and there's another sort of ambulance emergency services one that's white. I mean, I think probably outside of the 5 Thunderbird machines, this model probably makes the most appearances, certainly as vehicles go, in the whole series. It's a great looking thing. I think it's scratch built. Probably the wheels came from something, but I did a bit of research and it doesn't look like anything was sort of toy bashed or kit bashed. So I think this was an original design. Speaking of the Hood, he shows up in a number of episodes, but I think only like 6 or 7. He's not in it as much as you think. But one of the episodes is Desperate Intruder, where there's an expedition that Brains and Tintin are helping their friend with to sort of find this sunken city, and the Hood sort of wants a piece of this action. Always one for money, the Hood. He has this submarine. It's actually carried aboard this kind of really cool looking truck, which I have not done. But the submarine that comes out of the back and is really sort of featured in the episode is the submarine E3. He doesn't really call it anything. I resisted calling it the Hood submarine. The submarine E3 is what it says on the side. It's a cool little thing. Like I said, it's launched out of the back of this truck. It gets into a bit of a skirmish with Thunderbird 4 around the ruins of this temple. It's really cool. It's a really cool episode. When I was younger, it was kind of, that's one of kind of like the slow episodes, or one of the, because there wasn't a fancy pod vehicle, but it's really great. I mean, it's really well put together, and the music score's great. It's one of the episodes that has an original score. But this submarine also shows up in The Man from MI5, where Brains is sort of testing this radio controlled toy submarine in the pool, and it's the same model as the Hood submarine. So maybe in the world of Thunderbirds of 2025, maybe this is a commercially available sub and someone made a toy of it, and Brains sort of was making use of it. I think this would be great in the light blue plastic they used for their Luftwaffe kits. There's a lot of really cool aircraft in Thunderbirds, and one of them is in the Duchess assignment, where Jeff and Lady Penelope go to a public air show, and one of the things they see is this sort of flat aircraft where a smaller jet fighter sort of lands on it in midair and then takes control of the bigger plane, and that pilot ejects, and then the pilot of the small fighter, which is now attached, brings it all into land conventionally on a runway. It's a cool plane. Again, you only see it in profile, and there's one really great shot looking down on it as it's sort of coming in the runway, and there's quite a few publicity stills that involve this model. There's one that showed up in TV 21 where it's meant to be at the bottom of the sea and Stingray sort of nearby. I've called it the US Air Force carrier craft, because I think that's what Jeff calls it. And then the fighter plane, I think it's called a Dart somewhere. A lot of the stuff in Thunderbirds isn't named and has sort of since been given names either in the comic publications at the time or books, or I don't know where some of this stuff comes from. So I've tried to be as faithful to the show as I can, and it's a pretty big plane, so I think this would be 1:4:4 scale. So the fighter would come in at around about 5 inches, and the carrier would be about 13 inches long. So it'd be a nice size kit. I see this in the light blue German World War II bomber plastic, maybe in a kind of silver. It's sort of an odd colour. It looks like the same colour as the Zero X that we see later in the Thunderbirds feature film. The dicetylene cage is one of the most unusual machines that we see International Rescue use. It's only in the one episode, which was often the case with sort of pod vehicles or their special equipment that always have something uniquely suited to the mission or operation at hand. But anyway, this was used in the episode 30 Minutes Afternoon. There's a guy trapped at the bottom of an elevator shaft, so they have to, haul him out. So they use this dicetylene cage, and presumably dicetylene is sort of a special concoction or something that Brains has created to suppress fire, because it seems very effective dousing all the flames. So this thing gets lowered down like a lift, and this grab comes out of the bottom, grabs onto the damaged elevator with Prescott inside it, and then the whole thing then ascends the tunnel to safety. It's a really great sequence. The effects are fantastic. I just love this thing. I mean, for a moment, let's put aside the practicality of how this actually gets into an elevator shaft. We'll come back to that in a second. But I really love this thing. I love this design. I love this model. Because we see earlier in the episode when we see, Prescott in the building before the accident, we see the lift, and it's a pretty standard lift. It has, a couple of cables that sort of pull it up and down, and it has little wheels, I think, that kind of sit in rails that sort of guide it. It's a regular lift elevator as we would expect. But this thing, by contrast, it's supported by this big chunky chain. It looks probably like they used a motorcycle chain or something for the model, but it's sort of very thick articulated chain that then has sort of 4 points of connection with these steel cables that have really clearly got strong, sturdy attachments to the cage. There's a central attachment as well, and it just really looks the part. So there's a lot of redundancy sort of built in. There's loads of these nozzles on both sides and underneath to spray the dicetylene onto this tunnel. So you can tell it's really been designed to fight fires and, as I said, sort of have some redundancy built in and be safe. There's a similar sort of thing in Pit of Peril where Virgil is lowered into the burning pit and he's got this sort of full heat-proof suit. He's got clear visibility. He's fully protected. He's got radio communication and he's supported by what looks like a sort of a pulley system that looks really tough. And there's multiple cables coming off that, which probably is either redundancy or some sort of pulley or gearing system to make the lowering and raising a bit more efficient. It's just really great. And in contrast to what you've seen earlier in the episode where the army people are just kind of using what they've got, when you sort of see that and then you see the international rescue one, you're like, oh yeah, these guys have really built this for dangerous situations and rescuing people, and this is not going to fail. And I just love that. I love that you can tell that was the thinking from International Rescue. I love it when you can see the difference between something that they have and something that sort of normally exists in the world. A lot of the time the things are fantastic, but when there's kind of like the real world version and then the International Rescue version, it really reinforces that these guys are, way ahead of everyone. So how do they get this thing into the elevator shaft? We're led to believe that it is something that comes out of the pod because, Scott arrives quite a time before them in this episode and doesn't actually do anything. So we assume it comes out of the pod. And I think in the Haynes technical manual or maybe in one of the comics, there's an illustration that shows it sort of being carried on one of the little tractors. That seems like it's probably a sort of pretty standard tractor that the different equipment can be added to it or it can be adapted. So small enough that it could drive into the building and then extend its arms with the cage into the elevator shaft and then sort of lower it down and that sort of thing. That seems pretty plausible. I do fantasize that maybe, as this is sort of the fire rescue equipment, maybe this was used in the fire we see them fighting at the beginning of Security Hazard, and you do see the monobrake in there, which is probably just because it was a nice prop they had around and looked good. It's red, which looks like a fire rescue thing. But maybe because the monobrake is low, maybe that would carry the dicetylene cage in some regards, or that sort of type of vehicle. Who knows? It's fun to speculate. But for this box art, I just said the cage and the kit would be 32nd scale, which wouldn't be, it's not big. I mean, the whole thing's probably about maybe 10, 12 feet high. So it'd be about a 3 or 4 inch model plus all the cable and then the grab. That'd probably be a gimmicky movable thing. And I think it would be fun if this was another use for the stand that you got with the human skeleton kit. For anyone who remembers that, it was a brilliant kit, so different, and it came in this kind of cool bone-coloured plastic. You had a base with it and a sort of right-angled wire with a hook on it, and you hung the skeleton from that. And I could see that's how you would probably do this. This is an odd one, but I love the fact that it is, again, one of those specially designed for a unique situation type of things. Another bit of an oddity that's carried in the pod is this undersea sealing device. You see this in Atlantic Inferno when there's an undersea earthquake and international rescue head out there, and this thing is carried in the pod with Thunderbird 4. Thunderbird 4 tows it along and releases it so that it drops down on top of this fissure where all this burning gas is coming from. And then these sort of hydraulic rams, if you like, shoot down into the ground, securing it. And then I guess there's some sort of valve inside that then sort of closes, sealing off this flow of gas and fire. Sort of interesting that International Rescue have sort of apparatus that they would sort of leave behind. I thought, all right, if you did a little kit of it in scale with the 144 Thunderbird 4 in a blister pack and sort of blue plastic and stuff, it'd be a fun little thing to have. Maybe, it'd be the kind of thing where it would actually be a sort of a box, like a Series 2, and it would be Thunderbird 4 and the sealing apparatus. But I thought just doing it as its own thing was kind of fun. The mobile crane is another pod vehicle. They use this in Path of Destruction, and it's probably the most general use vehicle that you ever see come out of the pod, because it's not just for going down lift shafts. It's sort of a high-speed vehicle that has this sort of retractable arm, and in the episode, Brains and Virgil are put up in this little platform, and it elevates so they can then sort of jump aboard the crab logger and into the cabin and stop it. When I was a kid, I remembered it basically looking like one of the elevator cars, but without the sort of the cushion on top. But it sort of doesn't have those same big, doughy wheels. But it would be something that would be a fun little kit. Again, 144 scale to go with the Thunderbird 2, and the arm would be sort of posable, little hinged thing. In the backstory of Thunderbirds, Jeff Tracy was an astronaut, and because it was made in 1965, they kind of said he was one of the first men to land on the moon. And the show's set in 2025. Yes, please add your comments now and tell me how it's really 2065. But anyway, it's set in a time period where Jeff, being one of the first men on the moon, would sort of be in the real-time timeline. Obviously, things didn't transpire that way, so you can kind of, either ignore it or embrace it and say, well, maybe the moon is now colonized and he was one of the first to still, go there kind of by rocket in a spacesuit or whatever. But anyway, there's a painting on the wall, and it's the painting that Virgil leans against to go into Thunderbird 2. So you see it quite a lot. I think it's intended that that's one of the rockets Jeff was in. Going to call it Jeff Tracy's rocket, but I thought that doesn't sound very authentic. So I've sort of called it Lunar Probe 4, because there's a number 4 on the side. The rockets in Thunderbirds, you see a Sun Probe, Martian Space Probe. So I thought, well, Lunar Probe, even though it's a manned mission, but just a little bit of fun. So I did this artwork of it roaring through space, heading towards the moon. I don't know that this exists anywhere else, sort of in the documentation or about the show. I mean, I do think in the show it is meant to be the rocket he went to the moon on, or a rocket he went to the moon on. The design is obviously heavily influenced by the sort of the Atlas rockets, the things that launched the Gemini and Mercury, the space capsules in the 60s. When I originally looked at it, I thought, oh, it is literally just one of those. But it isn't. It is adapted. It's kind of got a bit more of an interesting shape. So I just thought, hey, why not? That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. Please leave comments, ask questions if you're interested. Artwork is available from the website. These boxes are available to buy if you go to the website and go to the blogs page, because that was the only place I could find to put it. There is a section where it shows all the boxes that are available for sale and their prices and approximate size. I've sold some of these already and people seem very happy with them. Christmas isn't that far away. Thanks very much for watching. There'll be another video coming soon. Take care. Thanks again. Bye-bye.